Hi there, it's Chad Seay from Seay Real Estate here in Richmond, Virginia. And what I want to talk to you about this week is the difference between appraisals and assessments. It's very common for me to be in the house of someone who wants to sell their house and that homeowner tell me, well, the county or the city, they have it appraised for X amount of dollars. And what they really mean is that the county or city has it assessed for a certain amount. And certainly sometimes there's localities that somewhere along the life of a house, maybe something that resembles an appraisal is done to determine the value. But for the most part, that's not the case. An assessment is the county or city's attempt to, as best they can, ballpark the value of the house, and they use that to base their taxes on. How much taxes that homeowner will have to pay is a percentage of the assessed value. And sometimes locales will go years without adjusting that assessment. And what I find as I go to houses to help people get them sold, and I look at the local assessment, sometimes the actual value, what we call the market value, is a lot higher than that assessment. Sometimes it's lower. And there's no consistency as to how much higher or lower. So another thing I often hear is, well, is it true that my house should sell for 2% more than the assessed value or 10% more? No. There's no consistency at all. And sometimes even within the same county, I will visit a house where I'll tell the owner, yes, we can get 10, 20, 30% more than the current assessment. Sometimes I'll have to tell them in that same county, another house, well, it's probably about 10% lower than what the county has it assessed for. So no consistency. It helps me so I can tell prospective buyers what the taxes will be on the house, but we always try to educate people that it has no bearing really at all in the actual value of the home. Now, an appraisal, on the other hand, is usually part of the home selling process in that the buyer's lender, before they loan the buyer the money to buy that house, will send an appraiser to the house to make sure it's worth what that buyer is paying for. The buyer typically pays for that, somewhere in the ballpark of $400 as of this recording. And that appraiser will take great pains to determine the value of the house. They do so typically by what we call the comparison approach. Now, it's a little bit different if it's rental or income producing property where an income approach is used, but for your normal home that a person lives in and they want to sell it to another owner occupant, the comparison approach will be used to determine the value. And that appraiser is going to find houses that are as close to being like that one as possible, as close by as possible geographically, and they're going to compare. And these are going to be houses that have sold recently, normally within 6 months. Sometimes they'll stretch that to a year. But they're going to compare, and those houses have proven their value because someone bought them. And as they look at those that have sold and they compare it to what we call the subject property, as they're coming up with a value for that subject property, they'll add value for things that that house might have that these others didn't that sold recently. If the others that sold recently have something that the subject doesn't, well, maybe the subject isn't worth as much. And find of all finds is when the appraiser comes across a house that's just exactly like the one that they're appraising. There's really no adjustments to be made, and they can say, well, if that got that much money, then this one should get the same thing. That's an appraisal. It's a much more accurate gauge of the value. It's the same approach we as realtors take when we go to analyze a property we may be putting on the market. We won't go to the great detail oftentimes that an appraiser will do, but we'll bring those same comparable sales, we will make adjustments, and we will arrive at the value of the home that we're analyzing. So that's a little bit about appraisal. Sometimes a homeowner will ask me, well, should we do that before we put our house on the market, have it appraised? Well, typically best to let the buyer pay for that. They're going to be doing it as part of the process anyway. If you want to do it to just have another opinion of the value, there's no harm in that. And that is the definition of an appraisal, a man or woman's opinion of the value. We find that when we do the thorough analysis as realtors, that what we come up with is right around what most appraisers will. So a little bit about that subject today. Email me or call anytime if you have more questions about it or any other real estate matter. I'm Chad Seay with Seay Real Estate. Have a great week.